What is going on, guys? My name is Josh Frink, your favorite professional Pokemon TCG player, back today with the first tier list video that we are going to be making on the channel. Today, we are going to be breaking down the best plays for the Louisville Regional Championships this weekend, October 11th, on Saturday. I'll be on my way there tomorrow, but tonight we're going to be ranking how good of a play I feel all of the decks will be for the tournament. So we're going to be basing it on how good of a play we think it is to this tournament specifically. Before we get started, I do want to talk about a couple of different meta share things, right? What I expect to be highly played, and so therefore kind of building the criteria for what determines something to be a good or bad play. For me personally, going into this event, I think there are 4 decks to beat, the 4 top kind of decks that I will expect in terms of play rate, as well as a couple of sleeper picks and meta like regulars, let's say. So in terms of play rate, the decks that I expect to be the top 4 are Raging Bolt, Lugia, Terapagos Dusknoir, and Dragapult Dusknoir. Those are the decks that I expect to have the highest play rate in the tournament itself. It's not necessarily the most important thing. How good of a play something is matters a little bit more to me than how high the overall play rate will be, but I think it's important to talk about right from the get-go to say that I think that those 4 decks will be the highest played. I also think that Palkia Dusknoir will see a lot of play from very good players. I think Palkia Dusknoir is kind of the hype deck in the upper echelon of people that are playing the game, and so I do expect to see quite a bit of that as well. So getting right into it, we're going to go in the order that we have here. We're going to start with Raging Bolt. I'm going to put it in B tier. I think Raging Bolt is kind of always a B tier pick. There's not really a reason for it to be something else. It's incredibly strong. It's incredibly consistent. It doesn't have any like really truly terrible matchups other than like arguably Terapagos Dusknoir, just because Terapagos has so many things it can do to Raging Bolt, but it's still winnable. And you can always just win the game by being faster, more powerful, more aggressive than your opponent as well. So I do think Raging Bolt is quite a solid play. It's good into Regidrago. It's got a decent Charizard matchup right now. It's got an okay, I would say, Lugia matchup, and its Dragapult matchup is quite good as well. So into those sort of upper echelon plays, we're taking 2 maybe negative matchups, a very positive one in the Dragapult Pidgeot matchup, and then you have the mirror match, right? And so it feels like a solid play, but Raging Bolt's not a deck that's always super worried about, you know, its meta position, so much as just like being faster, being more consistent. That's kind of what turbo decks tend to do. It's had some solid performances. You know, it had the most instances in top 16 of any decks in the Dortmund and Joinville metagames, and it got 2nd place at the Lima SP, so I expect it to still be a solidly strong play. Now, Charizard Pidgeot, I'm going to go ahead and put in C tier. I don't love Charizard Pidgeot for this tournament. You take a pretty tough Lugia, especially considering that the most successful version of Lugia recently has been Rahul Reddy's version with the Raikou, which makes Lugia quite a difficult matchup for the Charizard. So I don't expect Charizard to be great. You have a decent Terapagos Dusknoir matchup, assuming that you can get out of the early game. You have an okay Raging Bolt matchup, probably slightly favored. And then your Dusknoir matchup, or Dragapult Dusknoir matchup, is pretty terrible. Pretty terrible, I would say. So we're gonna go ahead and say that Charizard is a C tier pick. I think it could potentially have a sick run. Like I said, if we really expect Terapagos Dusknoir to really pop off, Charizard feels like one of the better selections to win in that matchup specifically, but overall it seems pretty mediocre, so we're gonna put it down in C tier. Dragapult Pidgeot, this is gonna be our first A tier play. The list that won Dortmund is genuinely incredible. It's one of the coolest and most innovative archetypes that we've ever seen. If you haven't checked out my video playing that deck, you absolutely should. It is awesome. Turbo Dragapult is not exactly what you expect. I know this says Dragapult Pidgeot. We're going to pretend it's Dragapult Dusknoir. But yeah, Dragapult seems quite strong into the meta. It's got a solid Terapagos. It has a winnable Raging Bull matchup. It's not very good, but it's winnable. You have a pretty close Lugia matchup, especially when you include the Temple of Sinnoh. You have a lot of pop-off potential there as well. And then obviously the Mirror. You also take strong matchups into other things like the Iron Thorns that's seeing a lot of success right now. You have a very solid Charizard, a very solid Gardevoir, as well as many other things. This deck seems incredibly strong, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it take a repeat win. Regidrago. We're going to go ahead and put Regidrago in the A tier. I'm not ordering these in tiers right at the moment, but maybe at the end I'll kind of order them in terms of what I think. Regidrago seems like a very solid play. Specifically, Regidrago utilizing Noivern EX seems like a very strong play to this event. You kind of take a rough matchup into two of the higher play rate decks in Lugia and Raging Bolt. It's not unwinnable. Your Lugia matchup's not unwinnable. Your Raging Bolt matchup's not unwinnable, but it is quite bad. However, if you play the Noivern, you take a very, very strong matchup into Terapagos. You take a very strong matchup into Dragapult, a very strong matchup into Charizard, a solid Palkia Dusknoir matchup, and these are matchups that I think we really want to be trying to beat going into this weekend. So Regidrago requires a little bit of luck in terms of your matchups, or if you do happen to hit Lugia or happen to hit Raging Bull, you do need things to go kind of your way. But if you succeed in that endeavor, Regidrago seems like an incredibly, incredibly strong play for this weekend. This one hurts. It hurts to put Gardevoir here. It does. It hurts to put it here. But I think Gardevoir is in a little bit of trouble right now. I do think Henry Chow's turbo version of Gardy is probably the right way to be playing Gardevoir right now. You can also play with Devo, a little bit more standard version of the deck. I don't think either is particularly bad. I do think Henry's is a little bit more resilient to the turbo style decks that we are seeing have a lot of success right now. But I think if Gardevoir, the sort of control-esque version of Gardevoir, if you get a Gardevoir out, your matchups into things like Terapagos, Regidrago, Dragapult, all of those things improve quite a lot. So I could see Gardevoir having a solid performance this weekend. I just don't think that it's necessarily the best pick. As much as it hurts me, I don't think it's the best pick, so we're going to go ahead and put it in C tier. Lugia Archeops. This is going to be our first deck going in the S tier. Lugia is a terrible deck. I've said it many times before. If you know me outside of the channel, I am a A1 Lugia hater. But if you are looking at Lugia into the rest of the field, it just has such a strong meta position right now. You've got a solid Dragapult, you've got a solid Regidrago, you've got a solid Raging Bolt matchup, you've got a solid Charizard matchup. A lot of these matchups that are going to be a lot worse for you are going to see lower play rates, right? Miraidon, Iron Thorns, we're not expecting to see a ton of those. You have a solid Palkia Dusknoir matchup as well, and so Lugia is going to land itself in the S tier. You do take a bit of a rougher matchup to Terapagos Dusknoir, but it's far from unwinnable. So Lugia looking to be one of the strongest plays once again, going into the first North American tournament of the Stellar Crown format. So it seems pretty solid. It seems pretty solid. Terapagos Dusknoir is going to go into the A tier. I have said publicly that I think Terapagos Dusknoir is the best deck in this current format. I think the issue with it lies in the fact that the Lima SPE happened this past weekend, and it was able to take the victory. I think as it stands now, Terapagos is kind of the deck to beat for the tournament. Most people are going to be bringing a deck that I think they feel that they can beat Terapagos Dusknoir with, because I expect it to skyrocket in terms of popularity. I still think the deck is incredibly strong. You've got a solid Lugia matchup. You've got a very, very positive Raging Bolt matchup. Your Dragapult matchup is close, but not unwinnable. I would say it's slightly unfavored. Your Regidrago matchup, if they're not playing Noivern, is a coin flip. You know, your Charizard matchup leaves a little to be desired, but I think other things are kind of bullying Charizard out of the meta. So Terapagos, I think, will stay around the S or A tier throughout the entire format. The deck is incredibly strong, and I think it will continue to have a strong place in the metagame. we're going to go ahead and put Snorlax Stall in C tier. I think this is one that could potentially move up, but Snorlax to me doesn't feel incredibly good. It struggles a lot with some of the Dusknoir decks. Dusknoir is kind of antithetical to Snorlax's entire strategy because Dusknoir can allow decks to stay on even prizes against Snorlax, basically mitigating that counter catcher, forcing them to find their boss earlier, making it easier to utilize switch outs in order to stay in the game via those Dusknoir pieces. So you take a rougher Terapagos, you take a rougher Dragapult, you always are going to lose to Lugia, so it doesn't feel like a fantastic play. I wouldn't be surprised to see it doing well. This is another one similar to Gardevoir and Charizard where I wouldn't be shocked to see these decks doing well, but on the whole, I don't think it's the right play for this weekend. Now, Iron Thorns is an interesting one. I'm going to go ahead and put Iron Thorns in B tier. Obviously, the World Championship winning deck. Iron Thorns kind of looks to capitalize on specific matchups or, you know, sort of keeping your opponent's strategy at bay long enough to take wins. You're two-shotting a lot of these pieces, and some of your worst matchups are not incredible meta calls right now. The Gardevoir and the Snorlax tend to be some of Iron Thorn's worst matchups, and both of those are pretty weak right now, so that's a positive thing. And Lugia, obviously being one of the best decks right now, is quite good for Iron Thorns as well. The problem with Iron Thorns lies in the other really powerful decks. You don't have a very good Dragapult matchup, especially Dragapult Dusknoir is quite a difficult deck to contend with as the Iron Thorns. Terapagos Dusknoir, assuming decks are playing Vitality Band, which I assume that they will, you don't shut off their Noctowls, and so it's quite hard to keep up there as well. And your Raging Bolt matchup, while it is good, is not unlosable either, especially as we see people transitioning into the Slither Wing tech as opposed to the Sandy Shocks. That's something that hurts you quite a bit too. So while I do think Iron Thorns can certainly have a run this weekend, you know, if their opponents just draw bad enough, they're always going to be in a solid spot. So I think Iron Thorns belongs right in that B tier. Palkia Dusknoir, this is going to be our second S tier play for the weekend. Palkia Dusknoir, if you haven't played it, you have to go try it. Stefan Ivanov and Grafton Roll both had pretty solid success with the deck at the last two significant majors, and so Palkia Dusknoir looking to be incredibly strong. It is one of, if not the most powerful deck in the format right now. I think it's less consistent than Terapagos, but when you pop off, this deck can do anything. The Greninja EX is an incredibly crazy card, and so I think Palkia is very strong. The combination of Radiant Greninja with Dusknoir to get rid of Manaphy's is just ridiculous, and 130 plus 90 is really good, right? If you can pop a Dusknoir turn 2 and then utilize Radiant Greninja, you're going to be knocking out things like Lugia V, you're going to be knocking out things like Regidrago V, which is very powerful, and the Greninja EX allows you to hit for fighting weakness, which is very strong right now. It's great into Terapagos Dusknoir, it's great into the Iron Thorns, it's great into the Lugia deck because so many of their attackers are weak to fighting. So I think Palkia Dusknoir is one of the best plays for the weekend. I wouldn't be surprised to see it have a ton of success, so it's gonna go in the S tier. Miraidon, this is a hot take, but I'm gonna put Miraidon in the A tier. Miraidon is an interesting one right now. The biggest downside to Miraidon is the fact that you have to play Miraidon, in my opinion. You have to use generators, you live and die by them. But if you just look at Miraidon's matchups into those top 4 decks, right? You have Lugia, which should be a very good matchup. You have Terapagos Dusknoir, which isn't an unlosable matchup, but you don't have the same problem as other turbo decks where they can just force you through a one-prizer because you can simply Iron Hands to take 2. And so as long as you're playing around the Briar turn, you should be well positioned into Terapagos Dusknoir. This is one of those decks that's going to be solid into the Dragapult deck as well. I wouldn't say that it's quite as good of a matchup as before. Now that they have Dusknoir, it's a little bit worse, but I would still call it favored for Miraidon. And then you have Raging Bolt, which historically wasn't a great matchup for Miraidon, but now that you have the Area Zero Underdepths, you have more options to be able to one-shot a Raging Bolt EX, which is very good. So yeah, I think Miraidon is very well positioned on paper. I myself probably would not play it just because I don't want to have to hit generators all day. But if you're looking to play a turbo deck, Miraidon is certainly the one for this tournament. Next up, we've got Pidgeot Control. I'm going to go ahead and put Pidgeot Control in B tier. I think Pidgeot Control is much better than Snorlax Stall. It's probably slightly better of a play than Iron Thorns as well, although I'm not 100% sure on that. I think Pidgeot Control can sometimes struggle into these heavy Dusknoir formats because it's quite easy for the Dusknoir to just stop you from being able to play the game. Your Mimikyu strategy is a little bit weaker, even if you play all 3 copies, but Pidgeot Control does seem like a solid play overall. I would recommend, if you're going to play the Pidgeot Control, that you play multiple Mist Energy. I would not play less than 3 Mimikyu. And if you want some help in the Lugia matchup, you can also play the Fighting type Diancie to deal with those Chinchinos and then go for your Ursaluna loop. The nice thing about Control, and I think Control could even push up to the A tier in terms of play, actually, and I'll kind of reflect on that going into the end of the video. But I think it's a little tough. It always struggles against the Lugia, and the rest of the top tier matchups feel like they could be risky. If Regidrago is going to resurge a little, that's a little scary as well. Raging Bolt, typically a scary matchup for Pidgeot. So while you can kind of beat everything, and you do get the natural control buff of people just not knowing how to play against the deck, I wouldn't necessarily call it an excellent play for the weekend. We're going to go real fast through these because these are our 3 D tier decks. Palkia Noctowl could maybe be C tier, but we'll talk about these a little bit. Turbo Roaring Moon is just not in a great spot. As far as turbo decks go, when you have to Frenzied Gouging, and then Frenzied Gouging means that your 2-prizer is getting knocked out by Dusknoir in a format where Dusknoir is all of the rage, that doesn't feel very good. So it's still good, it's still fast, it's still powerful, but for the time being, I think Turbo Roaring Moon is going to take a back seat. Terapagos Pidgeot, I'm just kind of assuming that this is the tank version of the deck, which hasn't really seen any success. Maybe somebody has cooked something for this weekend, but to me it feels like with Raging Bolt being as popular as it is, with Lugia being as popular as it is, where they have these very, very high damage caps, it doesn't feel very good. And then Palkia Noctowl I think is okay. I would almost never play Palkia Noctowl over Palkia Dusknoir, and I would never play Palkia Noctowl over Terapagos either, so I'm not sure exactly why you would want to play the Palkia Noctowl right now. I myself have not played too much with the deck, so I don't expect it to be incredibly popular. I don't think it's a great play, so we're gonna go ahead and end the list there, and I will be right back. I am going to edit the list to put everything in order, and yeah, we'll jump to that right now. So as you can see, we didn't change too much. We do have Palkia Dusknoir taking the crown. I think it's the best play for this weekend. Personally, I am very tempted to play it. I haven't had as much time to prep with the deck as I might like to, so I may end up defaulting to the Terapagos Dusknoir, but Palkia seems like it's the deck to beat for the weekend. Lugia taking that second place. In the A tier, we've got Dragapult, we've got Terapagos, so kind of looking at those sort of best decks, those most played decks as the top 3, alongside of Palkia Dusknoir, which I don't expect to be in the top 4 in terms of play rate, but I do expect a higher than average number of top players to be on the Palkia Dusknoir as well. So yeah, that's my tier list for the Louisville Regional Championships. If you liked this tier list style video and you would like to hear me talk more about my thoughts on the metagames going into various tournaments, please let me know down below. You can leave a like. If you want to subscribe, I'd really appreciate that as well. But until next time, I'll see you later.